The dust settled like whispered prayers across Redemption Creek as Martha wiped flour-dusted hands on her apron, watching the stranger stumble through her kitchen door. His weathered boots dragged against wooden planks, each step echoing like distant thunder in the desert. The old cowboy's eyes, steel gray as storm clouds, fixed upon her with an intensity that made her heart gallop like wild mustangs. "Ma'am," his voice rasped, rough as sandpaper against silk. "They say you cook like an angel descended from heaven itself." Martha's cheeks flushed rose-petal pink. At 23, she'd inherited her grandmother's kitchen and her mother's curves, but no man had ever looked at her with such raw hunger, not for food, but for something deeper, more primal. His gaze traveled from her emerald eyes to where her dress hugged her waist, lingering like morning dew on desert flowers. "What brings you to my humble establishment, stranger?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, fingers unconsciously smoothing her skirt. The cowboy removed his hat, revealing silver hair that caught lamplight like moonbeams on water. "Name's Jake Thornfield, and I'm carrying death in my chest like a loaded pistol." He coughed, crimson droplets staining his weathered lips. "Doc says I got maybe 3 sunsets left before I ride into that final canyon." Martha's breath caught. She'd seen death before. It wore many faces in this unforgiving land, but never had it walked into her kitchen wearing such masculine grace. Jake's shoulders filled the doorframe like mountain peaks, his presence commanding yet vulnerable. "I got one last request, little dove," he continued, stepping closer until she could smell leather, tobacco, and something indefinably male that made her pulse quicken. "Been riding these plains for 40 years, tasting nothing but beans and hardtack. Before I meet my maker, I want to taste paradise one final time." What kind of paradise?" Martha stammered, her hands trembling as she reached for her wooden spoon, a nervous habit that made her appear even more innocent. Jake's eyes darkened like approaching storm clouds. "They say you make apple pie that could resurrect the dead and biscuits softer than a woman's touch. But more than that." He paused, his calloused fingers brushing against her wrist as he steadied her shaking hand. "I want to taste something made with love, with passion, with the fire that burns in a woman's heart." The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the air thick as honey. Martha's breathing quickened, her chest rising and falling beneath her cotton dress. She'd never been this close to such raw masculinity. Jake radiated danger and desire like heat from a forge. I could make you anything," she whispered, her voice catching like silk on thorns. "Then make me remember what it feels like to be alive." Jake murmured, his thumb tracing circles on her wrist that sent lightning through her veins. "Cook for me like you're feeding your lover's soul." Martha nodded, her mind spinning like tumbleweeds in a cyclone. As Jake settled into her kitchen chair, his presence filling every corner of her sanctuary, she began gathering ingredients with trembling hands. Flour dusted the air like snow, sugar sparkled like diamonds, and butter melted under her touch like her resolve under his burning gaze. Outside, the desert wind howled its ancient song, but inside Martha's kitchen, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that would change both their lives before the sun kissed the horizon goodbye. Steam rose from Martha's pots like spirits ascending to heaven, but the real heat came from Jake's unwavering stare as she moved around her kitchen with graceful precision. Every bend to retrieve ingredients from low shelves made her dress pull taut across curves that hadn't gone unnoticed by the dying cowboy's appreciative eyes. "Tell me about yourself, little dove." Jake's voice rumbled like distant thunder as she kneaded dough with increasing fervor. "What dreams live in that beautiful head of yours?" Martha's hands worked the dough harder, flour creating clouds around her flushed face. "Dreams are dangerous things in the desert, Mr. Thornfield. They dry up faster than morning dew." "Call me Jake," he insisted, rising from his chair with surprising grace for a man carrying death's burden. He moved behind her, close enough that his breath warmed her neck like desert wind. And some dreams are worth dying for. Her kneading faltered as his presence enveloped her like a warm blanket. I dreamed once of opening a restaurant in San Francisco, cooking for refined folks who appreciate more than just filling their bellies. What stopped you? His voice was closer now, intimate as a lover's whisper. Papa died, left me this place and his debts. Then Mama followed him to the grave, broken-hearted. Martha's voice cracked like dried leather. Been cooking for cowboys and drifters ever since, watching my dreams blow away like tumbleweeds. Jake's weathered hand covered hers on the dough, his touch sending electricity through her entire being. Maybe it ain't too late for new dreams, darling. The endearment made her knees weak as fresh butter. She turned in the circle of his arms, suddenly aware of how his shirt stretched across his broad chest, how his eyes held depths darker than midnight canyons. You're a dying man, Jake Thornfield. What dreams could you possibly offer? His thumb traced her jawline like he was memorizing every curve. The dream of feeling alive one last time. The dream of tasting heaven before I ride into hell. Martha's breath hitched as his other hand settled on her waist, fingers spanning her corseted middle. The kitchen suddenly felt like a furnace, sweat beading on her forehead despite the evening coolness creeping through windows. Your pie's burning, Jake murmured against her ear, but neither moved to save it. Let it burn, Martha whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. I'll make you something better. What's better than paradise, little dove? Her hands found his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heartbeat beneath worn cotton. Something made with more than just ingredients. Jake's eyes darkened like storm clouds gathering strength. You're playing with fire, Martha. I'm not a good man. Done things that would make angels weep. Then let me be your redemption, she breathed, her innocence warring with newfound desire that burned hotter than her ovens. The moment stretched between them like a taut rope, ready to snap. Jake's hands tightened on her waist as Martha's fingers traced the weathered lines of his face, memorizing every scar, every mark that told stories of a hard life lived on the edge of civilization. Martha, he groaned, her name a prayer on his lips. But before either could cross that final threshold, the kitchen door burst open like a gunshot, shattering their intimate bubble. A young man in a deputy's badge stood silhouetted against the dying light, his face a mask of fury and betrayal. Step away from her, Thornfield, the deputy snarled, hand hovering over his pistol. Martha, what in tarnation are you doing with this murderer? Martha's world tilted like a house in an earthquake. Murderer? Jake's hands dropped from her waist as if burned, his face hardening into the mask of a man who'd faced death too many times to count. Hello, Tommy. Still playing lawman, I see. The revelation hit Martha like a physical blow, her dreams crumbling faster than sandcastles in a storm. The kitchen fell silent except for the crackling of dying embers in Martha's stove, the tension thick enough to cut with her sharpest knife. Deputy Tommy Morrison's hand trembled above his gun, 20 years of buried rage burning in his eyes like desert fire. You don't know who you're harboring, Martha, Tommy spat, never taking his gaze off Jake. This man killed my father in cold blood 15 years ago. Martha's world spun like a dust devil, her hands gripping the flour-dusted counter for support. The man who'd made her feel more alive in 2 hours than she had in years. A killer. Jake, is it true? Jake's silence stretched like shadows at sunset before he finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of buried sins. Your father drew first, boy. Had 3 men backing his play in a rigged poker game. I was just a kid trying to make enough money to buy medicine for my dying sister. Liar! Tommy's voice cracked like a whip. You shot him in the back. I shot him in the chest, facing him square. Jake corrected, his steel gray eyes never wavering. Your father was a cheat and a coward, Tommy, but he was still your father, and I'm sorry for that burden I put on your shoulders. Martha watched this deadly dance between past and present, her heart fracturing like glass in a hailstorm. The Jake who'd touched her with such reverence, who'd made her feel beautiful and desired, was he truly a cold-blooded killer? Why didn't you tell me? She whispered, her voice barely audible above the desert wind rattling her windows. Jake's weathered face softened as he looked at her, regret pooling in his eyes like water in a drought. Because for the first time in 40 years, someone looked at me like I was worth saving instead of hanging. Tommy's laugh was bitter as alkali water. Worth saving? Martha, this man's got more blood on his hands than a slaughterhouse butcher. The Thornfield gang terrorized half of Arizona territory. The Thornfield gang died with my brothers at Devil's Canyon, Jake said quietly. I've been riding alone for 10 years trying to outrun ghosts that won't stay buried. Martha's mind reeled with revelations that shattered her innocent worldview like bullets through window glass. Yet something in Jake's voice, in the way his shoulders carried invisible weight, spoke of a man haunted rather than heartless. Tommy, she said slowly, her voice gaining strength like a gathering storm, put down your gun. Martha, you don't understand. I understand plenty, she interrupted, stepping between the two men despite the danger crackling in the air like lightning. I understand that Jake Thornfield came to my kitchen asking for one last meal before he dies. I understand that he's got consumption eating him alive from the inside. And I understand that whatever sins he's carrying, he's already paying the ultimate price. Martha, you don't understand. I understand plenty, she interrupted, stepping between the two men despite the danger crackling in the air like lightning. I understand that Jake Thornfield came to my kitchen asking for one last meal before he dies. I understand that he's got consumption eating him alive from the inside. And I understand that whatever sins he's carrying, he's already paying the ultimate price. Tommy's face contorted with confusion and betrayal. You're defending a murderer? Martha's chin lifted with newfound defiance, her green eyes blazing like emeralds in firelight. I'm defending a dying man who showed me more tenderness in 2 hours than any so-called good man has in 23 years. Jake stepped forward, his hand gentle on Martha's shoulder. Little dove, don't throw away your reputation for a man like me. Tommy's right. I've done terrible things. She turned to face him, her hands framing his weathered cheeks with surprising boldness. Then let me give you something good to remember when you meet your maker. The air between them crackled with electricity as Martha rose on her tiptoes, her lips brushing Jake's in a kiss that tasted of flower, hope, and desperate redemption. Tommy's shocked gasp echoed through the kitchen as the innocent cook claimed the outlaw's mouth with a passion that surprised them all. When they broke apart, Jake's eyes held wonder instead of the haunted emptiness that had defined him for decades. Now, Martha said, turning back to her stove with renewed purpose, I'm going to finish cooking this man's last meal, and neither hell nor high water will stop me. Dawn painted the desert sky in shades of rose and gold as Martha placed the final dish on her small wooden table, transformed into an altar of culinary devotion. Jake sat propped against pillows she'd brought from her own bed, his breathing labored, but his eyes bright with something that transcended physical pain, gratitude mixed with an emotion deeper than the Grand Canyon. Tommy had reluctantly holstered his weapon, agreeing to let the dying man eat his final meal before facing whatever justice awaited in the afterlife. He stood guard by the window, his young face a battlefield between duty and the mercy Martha had awakened in his heart. I ain't never seen a spread like this, Jake whispered, his voice rough as sandpaper but warm as summer rain. Before him lay golden biscuits that seemed to glow in the morning light, apple pie with lattice crust perfect as church lace, and beef stew that filled the kitchen with aromas rich enough to resurrect the dead. Martha knelt beside his chair, her dress pooling around her like spilled cream. "This isn't just food, Jake. It's every dream I ever had, every prayer I ever whispered, every ounce of love I've been saving for someone worthy of it." His weathered hand found hers, fingers intertwining like their souls had been searching for each other across decades of loneliness. "Little dove, you've given a dying sinner more than he deserves." "Taste it," she urged, lifting a spoonful of stew to his lips with the tenderness of a mother feeding her child, a lover nourishing her beloved soul. Jake's eyes closed as flavors exploded across his palate. Not just beef and vegetables, but Martha's essence, her hopes, her innocent passion, transformed into sustenance that fed more than his body. A single tear traced down his weathered cheek like morning dew on desert stone. "Sweet Jesus," he breathed, "this tastes like heaven itself." Martha's heart soared like an eagle catching thermals, watching this dangerous man become vulnerable as a newborn colt under her care. She fed him bite by bite, each morsel a communion between two souls who'd found each other at the edge of eternity. "Tell me about your sister," she whispered as he savored her biscuits, butter melting on his lips like her resolve under his grateful gaze. Jake's eyes grew distant as prairie horizons. Sarah was everything good in this world, gentle as spring rain, pure as mountain snow. When the fever took her, it took the last decent part of me too. "No," Martha said firmly, her thumb wiping crumbs from his lips with intimate familiarity. "The decent part of you is right here, right now, letting yourself be loved." As the sun climbed higher, painting the kitchen in golden light, Jake grew weaker but more peaceful, as if Martha's food was healing wounds deeper than his failing lungs. Tommy watched from his post, his anger slowly transforming into something resembling understanding. "Martha," Jake whispered as she offered him the final bite of apple pie, "I got something for you." With trembling hands, he pulled a leather pouch from his vest, pressing it into her flour-dusted palms. "Money I've been saving for 20 years, trying to buy back my soul. Take it. Go to San Francisco. Open that restaurant. Cook for people who'll appreciate the angel you are." Martha's eyes filled with tears that sparkled like diamonds in desert sunlight. "Jake, I can't." "You can, and you will," he insisted, his voice gaining strength from some final reserve of will. "Promise me, little dove. Promise you'll fly away from this dusty place and show the world what paradise tastes like." Through her tears, Martha nodded, sealing the vow with a kiss that tasted of apples, cinnamon, and bittersweet goodbye. Jake's breathing grew shallow as the morning aged, but his eyes never left her face, memorizing every freckle, every curve, every expression of the woman who'd shown him redemption in his final hours. As the church bell tolled noon, Jake Thornfield drew his last breath with Martha's name on his lips and the taste of heaven lingering on his tongue. The notorious outlaw died not in a blaze of gunfire, but cradled in the arms of an angel who'd fed his starving soul with more than food. She'd nourished him with love, forgiveness, and the promise that even the most lost souls could find their way home. 6 months later, Martha's restaurant in San Francisco bore a simple sign, "Paradise Found," and every apple pie she served carried the memory of a dying cowboy who'd taught her that sometimes the most beautiful endings come disguised as heartbreaking beginnings.